Okay, so we're starting on 5.1, fundamental identities. Your objectives, you're going to apply negative angle identities and other fundamental identities to trig functions to basically rewrite them. Sometimes it's going to make it a more complicated looking one, but the purpose of this one is to get you playing with the identities and changing what they look like. So, reminder, these are all on that cream colored sheet of paper you have. Reciprocal identities, that cotangent and tangent are reciprocals of each other, secant and cosine are reciprocals of each other, and sine and cosecant are reciprocals of each other. And we can go back to, if the cosine value is 1/2, then the secant value is 2, just the reciprocal. Our two quotient identities, the tangent is sine over cosine, cotangent is cosine over sine. Your Pythagorean identities, I gave you the breakdown of all of these. This is the one that you absolutely have to remember. Sine squared plus cosine squared equals 1. And then the next one is tangent squared plus 1 is secant squared. And it doesn't matter really the order on this one. 1 plus cotangent squared plus 1, it doesn't matter, it's going to give you cosecant squared. And the new ones are the negative angle identities. Sine of negative theta, that means we're going down on the unit circle instead of up, so clockwise instead of counterclockwise. Sine of negative theta will give you negative sine of theta. Same with cosecant, it makes sense because they're reciprocals of each other. Cosine negative theta is the same as cosine of theta because it doesn't matter if you're quadrant, remember for cosine, they're positive in quadrant 1 and in quadrant 4. So it doesn't matter if you're doing a positive angle or a negative angle, you're going to get the same cosine value. And tangent and cotangent, negative theta, because they have sine attached to them, is going to follow sine. The negative tangent of negative theta will give you negative tangent of theta, same with cotangent. These are important to know as you play around with these. Okay, so the very first one, when working with trig identities, look for an identity that relates items that you are working with. So our negative angle identity tells us that the cosine of negative theta is equal to cosine of theta. Well, cosine of theta is negative 0.65, therefore cosine of negative theta will also equal negative 0.65. Okay, another one on this one. You have cosine and then there's tangent. So go to our negative angle identities. The tangent of negative theta will give you negative tangent of theta. So we need to keep this one in mind, but let's work with tangent. Tangent is sine of theta over cosine of theta. And they gave us those values. Cosine is 0.8 and sine is 0.6. You can throw this in the calculator or you can just quickly reduce. This is going to be the same as 6 over 8. And the reduced value of it would be 3 over 4. Now keep in mind though, we're looking for tangent of negative theta, which is the same as negative tangent of theta, and tangent is 3/4. So our answer in the end would be negative 3/4. Okay, now this is going more along the lines of stuff that we've done earlier. This is with working with trig identities. Look for an identity that relates your items together. I want tangent, I have tangent, I want sine, and they're telling you just a little bit about secant. We did these, I believe it was in chapter 2, that we would identify what our x, y, and r is. So these should be on some of your note cards that you've made. I can remind you that tangent is y over x, sine is y over r, and secant, being the reciprocal of cosine, is going to be r over x. So we can see what everything's going on. So they gave me my y value and my x value. So they gave me square root of 7 here, and for the x, they gave me 2. but I have a negative sign, but notice the negative sign is not on any particular number. They're telling me that secant, which is the x value, is positive, which means the y value must be negative. Now, keep in mind, and for those of you going, well, what about r? R is always positive, always positive. And then this is something else you should have in your notes, that your value of r is equal to the square root of x squared plus y squared. So that gives me the square root of 2 squared plus negative 7 squared, which would give me the square root of 4 plus 7. The negative's being squared, so it goes bye-bye. The square root's being squared, so it goes bye-bye. And we're left with the square root of 11. Again, r is always positive. They're only asking you for sign. So sine of theta equals y over r, which is equal to negative square root of 7 over square root of 11. Clean up your, anyways, rationalize your denominator. Don't leave the radical on the bottom. We have the shortcut, but I'm going to do the math first time. The next time I'll do the shortcut, or I'll remind you the shortcut. Multiply top and bottom by square root of 11. And we get negative square root of 77 over 11. And there's your sign value. Now, to remind you of the shortcut is that we bring the radical, the whole thing up, and then take the radical off and leave the number on bottom. Okay, so next one, same work that we have to do. We have to identify x, y, and r. But this time they ask you to identify the 5 remaining trig functions. So I'm going to put these over here. We have sine of theta equals cosecant of theta equals cosine of theta, which they haven't given to us, secant of theta, tangent of theta, and cotangent of theta. They gave us cosecant, and cosecant is the reciprocal of sine. So negative 5 over 2, which gives us sine to be negative 2 over 5. So we need to identify our x value, our y value, and our r value. Now, cosecant is r over y, so we know that 5 is positive, y is negative. Then I want to point out that they told you that theta is in quadrant 3. And in quadrant 3, x and y are negative. So x squared equals r squared minus y squared. So x squared equals 5 squared minus negative 2 squared, which gives us 25 minus 4, or 21. So x squared equals square root of 20, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. X squared equals 21, and we square root both sides. We get x equals plus or minus square root of 21. Plus or minus. But in quadrant 3, our x values are negative. So it's going to be negative square root of 21. And now we can go through it. Cosine is x over r, reminder. Tangent is y over x. So cosine is going to be negative square root of 21 over 5. And tangent is going to be negative 2 over negative square root of 21. Cosine and secant reciprocal, so this becomes negative 5 over square root of 21. And cotangent becomes square root of 21 over 2. I am going to point out that these two are negative. I just didn't clean it up until I moved things over. These are both negative, so it's going to be positive. Rationalize your denominator, so it's going to be 2, bring the square root up, 21 over 21. Same thing with this one here. The 5 isn't going to go anywhere. We're going to try and squeeze them in. This is negative 5 square root of 21 all over 21. Again, this is stuff that we've done. It's been a while, but we have done these before. Okay, next problem. Number 30, they gave you sine and then they tell you, okay, cosine is going to be less than 0, which means cosine is going to be negative as well. So x, oh, I don't want that there. Okay, so on this one here, instead of taking time to write these up, okay, sine of theta equals negative 405, so we can go, well, x, sine doesn't have x. Y is going to be negative 4 because sine is y over r, and r is always positive, and r is 5. And if you didn't already notice, this is a 3, 4, 5 triangle. So that makes x to be 3, but this tells me x is smaller than 0, so it must be negative as well. Now, they gave us a sine value, negative 4 over 5, which makes cosecant negative 5 over 4. And then cosine is x over r, so negative 3 over 5, which gives us secant of negative 5 over 3. And then tangent is y over x, to both negative, so it's going to be positive, 4 over 3. And the reciprocal of that would be 3 over 4. Okay. This looks like this is going to be the end of the first video, which gives you your first homework right here, 1 through 31, every other odd, and then 33 through 42 all. You are going to be turning in 2 separate homeworks for section 5.1. So this is going to be 5.1a. That way when you have it done, you can just turn it in and it's done with. That way if you're struggling with the second part, and yes, the second part is going to be a little bit more difficult, the second part, then you'll be able to, we can determine which of the two it is. So your homework's going to be counting really double because 5.1a will get you 10 points and 5.1b will get you 10 points. So I need to make sure you're aware of that. Okay, good luck on this one.